He'd just crossed the number. Not a bonus, not a raise. The number that meant he was, technically, free. Mason Wells stood in a mechanical room on the 4th floor of an office building he'd serviced for 6 years. A soft drink bottling company on 2, a law firm on 3. Nobody up here but him and the hum of the rooftop units feeding down through the ductwork. He put the phone back in his pocket and finished the inspection. Gauge, filter, belt tension. Same order every time, 41 Tuesdays a year, same building, same clipboard, same brand of pen that always ran dry halfway through. Nobody on any floor of that building had any idea they were looking at a man who didn't need the job anymore. He liked it that way. Downstairs, a building engineer named Mr. Bell caught him near the loading dock, coffee in hand, same question he asked every quarter. "You ever gonna raise your rates, Wells?" "Everybody else did," Mason shrugged. "Contract's the contract." That wasn't really an answer. Mr. Bell knew it wasn't really an answer. He asked anyway, every time, like he was waiting for the year Mason finally admitted something. Not this year. Mason climbed back into his truck, an aging service van with the company name fading off the door in gray vinyl letters, and sat there a second longer than he needed to. He pulled the visor down. A laminated card was tucked behind the elastic strap, a single number written on it in pencil, smudged and rewritten so many times the card had gone soft at the corner. He didn't look at it. He already knew what it said. He'd checked that morning, before the sun was even all the way up, standing in his kitchen with his coffee going cold, and the number on his phone had finally matched the number on the card. 11 years of quarterly contracts, 22 buildings. A number he'd set for himself back when the whole idea felt more like a joke than a plan. He started the truck. Next stop was a laundromat on the east side, filter change, nothing complicated. He drove there like it was any other Tuesday, because as far as anyone could tell, it was. His father never worked for anybody. That was the thing people said, like it was a compliment. He fixed roofs, framed additions, hung drywall, whatever paid that month. Some months paid well. Some months didn't pay at all. Mason grew up watching his mother do math at the kitchen table with a pencil that never seemed to touch paper long enough. Not because there wasn't money, because there was no way to know if there'd be money next month, or the month after that, or the one after that. His father used to say he liked not answering to anybody. Mason believed him, mostly. But he also remembered the winter the truck got repossessed, and how his father just kept talking about freedom like nothing had happened. At 21, Mason took a job as an HVAC apprentice for $12 an hour. Steady hours, steady paycheck. A supervisor who told him what to do every single day, and Mason didn't mind one bit, because steady felt like something his father never had. He learned the trade fast. Compressors, refrigerant lines, the guts of a rooftop unit in July heat that made a man's shirt stick to his back by 9 in the morning. He was good at it. Quiet, careful, the kind of tech a building manager trusts with a key. For years, that was the whole plan. Get good, stay employed, never end up doing math at a kitchen table wondering if the lights would stay on. He didn't know yet that the same fear that made him crave a steady paycheck would be the exact thing standing between him and walking away from one, decades later, long after he didn't need it anymore. He thought the fear was about losing a paycheck. It would take him 20 years to find out he was wrong about that. At 30, Mason started his own company. Nothing dramatic about it. A used service van, a business license from the county clerk's office, and 3 commercial contracts he picked up from a company that was folding. The trick, if you could even call it that, showed up in the first year, and he almost didn't notice it himself. Every contract he signed, he wrote for 3 years instead of 1. Building managers liked that. Longer term, lower rate, one less thing on their renewal calendar every January. Mason liked something else about it. Once a 3-year contract auto-renewed the first time, most managers never looked at it again. It just sat there, quarter after quarter, doing its job in the background of a much bigger building with much bigger problems. He kept his rates almost exactly where he started them. Even as fuel went up, even as parts went up, even as every other HVAC company in the county raised prices twice a year like clockwork. Mr. Bell, running 4 buildings downtown, brought Mason on in year 2 of the company. He asked, even back then, why Mason didn't charge more. "Guy who charges the least gets called the most," Mason told him. That wasn't really the reason. It wasn't even close to the reason. But it was easier to say than the truth, which was something Mason wasn't ready to say out loud to anybody yet. Not his crew, not his wife, Renee, not even some mornings to himself. He just kept signing 3-year contracts, kept the rates low, kept the renewals quiet. By year 4, he had 9 buildings. Nobody watching him drive that fading service van from one filter change to the next would have called any of it a plan. It didn't look like anything. That was kind of the point. 9 buildings became 14. 14 became 22. The company didn't grow the way people picture growth. No new trucks lined up outside a bigger shop, no logo redesign, no grand opening. Just one contract at a time, 3 years each, quietly renewing while Mason worked the routes himself, same as always. He hired 2 technicians early on and trained them the way he'd been trained, careful, unhurried, the kind of work that doesn't cut corners because corners cost you contracts. By year 7, both of them could run half the routes without him. Mason kept driving anyway. Every few months, Renee noticed the laminated card behind his visor when she borrowed the truck for groceries. A number, penciled in, sometimes erased and rewritten smaller, like he was correcting his own math. She never asked about it directly. That wasn't how she and Mason worked. She noticed things and waited, the same way she'd noticed, years earlier, that he flinched a little whenever a customer paid late. She assumed it was some kind of revenue target, a business thing. Men in this line of work always had a number they were chasing. She was wrong, and she wouldn't find out how wrong for a long time. Because the number on that card wasn't tracking what the business made. It was tracking something else entirely. A countdown Mason had started years earlier and never told a living soul about, updated in pencil in the cab of his truck, usually late at night, usually alone. He'd started the habit the same month he signed his first 3-year contract. 11 years of erasing and rewriting the same few digits, getting closer every year, closer than even Renee could have guessed from a smudged card behind a sun visor. Whatever it wasn't about the buildings. It was never about the buildings. There was a Sunday, about a year before the number finally matched, when Mason almost said it. Renee was folding laundry on the bed, and he stood in the doorway with the words right there, close enough to touch. He could feel the shape of the sentence in his mouth. He didn't say it. He said something about the weather instead, and went out to check the truck for no reason at all, and sat behind the wheel in the driveway until his coffee went cold for the second time that week. That was the year the old fear came back, the one he thought he'd buried somewhere around his 15th building. Not fear of losing the company. Fear of what happened to men who said out loud that they didn't need to work anymore. He thought about his father, who never once said he was scared. Right up until the truck got hauled off on a flatbed, and he stood in the driveway laughing about it like it was somebody else's problem. Mason didn't want to be a man laughing in a driveway. But he also didn't want to be a man who kept driving that fading service van to 22 buildings for reasons he could no longer explain to himself, let alone to Renee. For a few weeks that spring, he went quiet. Not angry, quiet, just quiet. He came home, ate dinner, watched half an hour of whatever was on, and went to bed early, night after night, like something in him had gone still. Renee asked once if everything was all right at work. "Work's fine," he told her. It was, technically, true. Work had been fine for years. That wasn't the problem, and some nights, lying awake next to her, he almost laughed at how strange that was, to have solved the actual problem. Money, the whole reason he'd started any of this, and still not be able to say the sentence out loud. He had enough money to leave. He didn't have the words to say it. That was a year ago. Now it was a Tuesday morning in his own kitchen, coffee going cold for reasons that had nothing to do with fear this time, and a number on his phone that finally matched the number on the laminated card. He'd built a simple formula years earlier, sitting at this same table with a legal pad he later burned in the fire pit out back, half embarrassed at how much time he'd spent on it. Contract value. Equity in the business. What the company could sell for, conservatively, to somebody who wanted 22 auto-renewing accounts and 2 trained technicians who already ran most of the routes without him. He'd run that formula every few months for 11 years. This morning, for the first time, the number on the left matched the number on the right. He sat there a long moment, phone in his hand, Renee upstairs getting ready for the day, the house doing its ordinary morning sounds around him. He picked up his phone like he might call somebody. He put it back down. Not yet. He finished his coffee, grabbed his keys, and drove to the office building downtown. The one with the bottling company on 2 and the law firm on 3. Same as every Tuesday for 6 years. He climbed the stairs to the mechanical room instead of taking the elevator, which he never did, and stood there a minute longer than the job required, looking out through a service window at a parking lot full of cars belonging to people who had no idea what he'd just confirmed before breakfast. Gauge, filter, belt tension, same order, same building. A man who didn't need any of it anymore, doing the job anyway, one more time, because he hadn't figured out yet how to stop. Here's what the number actually was, in case you're still wondering. It wasn't income. It was never income. Mason's paycheck to himself had stayed almost exactly the same for 11 years. Modest, steady. The kind of number that wouldn't make anybody look twice at his tax return. The number on the laminated card was net worth. What the company was actually worth if he sold it tomorrow. 22 contracts deep, each one auto-renewing every 3 years without a single manager bothering to shop around, because the rate had never given anybody a reason to. Keeping the rates low wasn't generosity. It never was. A contract nobody questions is a contract nobody replaces, and Mason had understood that from the very first year, long before anyone thought to ask him why. Add the recurring contract value. Add the equity in a company that ran $14,000 a month through the books, whether Mason showed up or not, thanks to 2 technicians he'd trained slow and careful, the same way he'd been trained. Add it all up, and the number on that card read $2,700,000. A man in a fading service van, 22 buildings. Nobody who saw him climbing into that truck every morning would have guessed any of it. That was never about pride. It was never about hiding it, either. It was just what the business looked like from the outside, which had nothing to do with what it was actually worth on the inside. Mester. Bell found out eventually, years later, the way most people did, by accident, a conversation that went a little further than usual. He asked Mason, half joking, if he'd ever consider selling the company. "Already know what I'd get for it," Mason said. For once, that wasn't a dodge. That was the truth, sitting right there in the open, the same way it had been sitting behind his sun visor the entire time. The number had never been about walking away from the job. It was about not needing it anymore. Those turned out to be 2 very different things. He told Renee that night, not with a speech, just sat down across from her at the kitchen table. Same table where his mother used to do the math that never came out even, and told her the number, and what it meant, and how long he'd been carrying it around behind a sun visor without saying a word. She listened, and when he finished, she didn't look surprised. "I know," she said. "You know? I've seen that card for years. Mason." "I didn't know the number. I knew it mattered to you. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." He sat with that for a while. All those months of quiet, all that time spent working out how to say a sentence that, it turned out, she'd already made room for. He didn't quit the company. Not the next week, not the next month. The two technicians he'd trained were good enough to run it without him eventually, but eventually wasn't today, and Mason wasn't in any hurry to find out what a Tuesday looked like without the truck, without the gauges, without a building that didn't need him but let him show up anyway. What changed was smaller than that. The following Tuesday, he stood in the same mechanical room, same building, same soft drink company on 2, same law firm on 3. He checked the gauge, the filter, the belt tension, same order as always. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't check it, not because he had to ignore it, because for the first time in 11 years, checking it or not checking it didn't matter at all. He finished the inspection, said goodbye to Mr. Bell on his way out, and drove to the next building on a route he no longer needed and had somehow, somewhere along the way, come to want. Most men chase a number their whole lives thinking the number means leaving. For Mason, once he got there, it turned out to mean something closer to staying, just finally, for once, on his own terms.